What is up, fam? Welcome to Cognitive Dissonance, the channel where we make an attempt to kind of discern what the hell is really going on around here because nobody knows. Nobody knows, but we are going to try and figure it out. What is good? Prayers for Bruce? Prayers for Bruce. What up, Foxhole fam? Alara, Gary, Barefoot Patriotess, Hang 10, Belushi. What up, hubby? Thanks for the cookie. Much love to you. Keep True. Good to see you. Morning Flower, Jay Brewskis, Karen Hare. And what is going up over here on YouTube? Hey, Teresa, Jorge, Dennis Lindsay, Woke One. Good to see you guys. Frightening Me, Cads, Cairo Sounds, Karen. Fahim, good to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Man, there is some shenanigans going on with China. Yes, Redfish, this is absolutely cognitive dissonance over here, man. For sure. What up, Yuvonda? Good to see you. Yeah, so I had made, before I even get into this, I had made a comment for those of you that watch Space Force News on Sunday nights at 9 p.m., which you should be doing. And if you're not, I don't know what's going on with your life. Thank you for the cookie, Karen Hare. I had made a comment about a Chinese professor saying that making, a guy that is highly supported within the party, right, the CCP, making the comment that China had won at biological warfare. And at the time, I couldn't remember where I saw it or who had said it or whatever, which is unusual for me, but I found it. And I feel like it's a good place to start, and I'm just going to let you guys listen to this shiz. Man, listen to this.
Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Netizens are pressing for answers after a social media video triggered controversy online. In it, a pro-Beijing Chinese professor makes a number of veiled and curious comments, praising what he called China's 2020 achievements in biological warfare. Here are the details.
Curious remarks made by a Chinese professor are raising eyebrows online. In a video, he praised what he called China's achievements in biological warfare. Chen Ping is a professor of economics at a renowned Chinese university. He's been applauded by China's state-run media for his pro-Beijing remarks and has been dubbed an anti-U.S. warrior. His latest controversy comes as part of a YouTube video released earlier this year.
China's success in winning the trade war, technology war, and especially biological warfare in 2020 is unprecedented in history.
Chen described the year 2020 a turning point for China's modernization.
After 2020, the East Asian countries with the most landmass and power will begin the modernization process, led by the biological revolution.
His comments were soon posted on Twitter, sparking questions from users. Many doubled down on the professor's mention of biological warfare. One of them demanded further explanation, writing, "Please specify what biological warfare refers to." Another asked, "Does biological warfare mean that this was a planned strategic deployment?"
What does it sound like? That's crazy, right? And they found out the guy actually had residency in Texas also, right? But this is nothing new. This is nothing new. I mean, so the past few years have literally flipped the world upside down, right? Black swan events, supply chain collapses, ecological crisis, coronavirus, there's crazy elections, God knows what else, have really put us in a position where the tension in the air is palpable. Like we can all feel that something is coming, but what is really going on? Thank you for the cookie, Belushi. It seems to be a growing notion that war between the United States and China is coming. Now, nobody wants a war, right? I mean, well, like reasonable people don't anyway. But through the lockdowns and the mandates and the toilet paper shortages and whatever else, I mean, the one constant has been the beating of the drums of war with China. Now, Trump seemed to inherently recognize this, and he dealt with it fairly aggressively. I was a fan, okay? Um, but now we've got this like wishy-washy resident with questionable ties to China itself that welches on our allies. He's trying to reset our very way of life with the notion that he is building back something better. What a load of horse paste, right? I mean, it's freaking crazy. So and for those of you like we tend to pay attention to what's in front of us, right? What's right in front of us. But there has been a ton of China related news come out, not even just recently, but really important stuff in the past few days even, right? So this popped up today. John Kerry is doing John Kerry, right? Who never does anything crazy with other countries. He is been sent to negotiate with China on behalf of climate change. This is our climate change lord, right? And at the moment, Republicans are accusing this guy of lobbying against anti-slave labor legislation in Washington to get diplomatic ends with Beijing because the solar panels that these guys want to buy are being produced with actual slave labor, right? Imagine that. I mean, John Kerry negotiating with Iran, John Kerry doing shady shit with China. Like, none of this is surprising. Um, Obama's idea of a mandate is Michael. Yeah, well, there's that. There's that capable. What's up, fam? Um, yeah, so I mean, it's crazy. I mean, just yesterday, and you'll see why all this is applicable in a minute. Just yesterday, we saw that there was Canada had arrested the CFO of Huawei, right? And they had been holding her on behalf of the United States. Well, when she was arrested, in return, China arrested two guys from Canada. These two guys named dubbed the two Michaels, right? For no good reason had been holding them. This is an example of what they're calling hostage diplomacy, right? China swears up and down that these guys being arrested had nothing to do with this woman getting arrested. But the minute she gets released, right, which just happened the other day, China turns around and releases the two Michaels, right? So we're seeing what they're calling hostage diplomacy. We're seeing people that, I mean, these aren't soldiers, right? I mean, this wasn't really, I mean, was this really a hostage situation? Was this just, was this just in the norm for international disputes now? Um, and China is having a hell of a lot of problems on its own soil at the moment. Thank you for the shade, ZO2 Dave. Good to see you. China's having a hell of a lot of problems on its own soil right now. There are massive power outages going on right now. Now, China primarily uses coal to produce electricity over there. Okay, and they're having these rolling blackouts. A lot of these blackouts are affecting manufacturing and ports. Okay, so ports are closing down, or they're unable to keep up with the demand, um, as if we're not already having supply chain problems. Okay, so even though this sounds like it would be something that really is only applicable to China, I mean, think about what that means. We've got ships waiting off of the port of Los Angeles right now that can't get in for various reasons. We've got supply chain failures. I mean, the UK is having trouble with getting truckers to gas petrol. I mean, now we're having troubles at the ports in China. Like, this will affect us, right? A lot of our products, if not coming directly from China, go through the Chinese shipping system. So this is a huge problem. And we see Goldman Sachs cutting their growth forecast on China because of these power outages right now. And then there's Evergrande, which I've seen arguments both that go both ways. I've seen people arguing that Evergrande, which for those of you guys that don't know, Evergrande is one of the biggest housing companies in China. And we have seen a collapse in the Chinese housing market recently, because what happens is, right, Chinese investors, bonds don't really give them enough. They don't really trust stocks. I mean, God knows Chinese could go in and nationalize a company at any point, crash the stock market price. They could say the whole shit is illegal. They don't really know, so they don't really feel comfortable investing in the stock market there. Thank you for the cookie, Redfish. So what these people tend to do is buy houses, right? 2 and 3 houses. This is why, I've been looking at this like Chinese issue of the ghost cities recently. I don't know, it caught my attention, and I was really trying to figure out what the hell is going on with that. What it is that, number one, in China, for a man to get married, it almost as a prerequisite, the guy needs to own a house, right? Houses, luxury cars, luxury goods, like, because of their one child policy that they had for so long, there are way more men than there are women, right? Because these couples were selectively choosing to keep male babies over female babies. So now what they have is a great disparity in their population. So for a man to get married, he's got to have a lot of shit, right? So they're buying up 2 and 3 houses at a time. A lot of these houses that they're purchasing before they're even built, they're not even being lived in. So we get these vast swaths of cities that are being built, and it seems like there are no inhabitants there, right? Well, recently, one of the biggest companies that is doing this in China, Evergrande, has been, well, they defaulted the other day, but they've been on the brink of total default on all their debts, and they owe like almost, what, 280 something billion dollars in debt at this point, and they can't make their payments, right? So a lot of people are arguing that this is going to be China's Lehman moment, right? This is going to be China's 2008, and we know that in 2008, when the housing market collapsed here, it was like a domino effect to the rest of the world, right? So a lot of people you can see it in the markets. If you invest in stocks right now, if you even the crypto markets, all of the markets are shaky right now, right? People don't know what's going to happen, and they assume this is going to have a domino effect. I've seen other people arguing that even if they default, that the CCP is going to step in, and it's going to be more like a controlled demolition. They're not going to let it all fall apart at once. But what I will tell you is that Chinese investors are pissed, right? China really doesn't do well with protests and people speaking out on social media. Clearly, they don't really do well when the populace isn't in line with the demands of the party. And we are seeing this now. I mean, people are flipping out over losing their entire life's savings in the housing market right now, right? So China's got a lot of problems of its own. Okay, so there's a lot going on with China. I mean, for God's sakes, and I'm going to touch on Millie here shortly, but I mean, we are seeing various facets of life being attacked in a multiplicity of ways, not just over here, but in China as well. Um, what up, Karen Caldwell? Yes, listen, that's all I can say is like prep, right? That's the only thing I can figure. Like I do invest and I do have money put away, but like I also make sure I have, moderate stockpiles of things just in case because you never know. Um that's always a good strategy. But so obviously the world is in a massive state of flux. And what we know by looking at history is when this happens, right? We've got a rising economic power with China. We've got what seems to be a declining American power, obviously, on the world stage, right? And don't everybody jump on me about the strength of America. That's not what I'm talking about. You guys know I rock with my country. However, I'm talking about global perceptions, right? So when we have this growing economic power like we do in China, at some point there ends up being conflict. I mean, this happens like 80% of the time. You've got an economic power that surpasses the current the current state, that's been in unipolar control, and then there ends up being some sort of conflict. So especially with something like Taiwan, which appears to be quite a powder keg, right? Um, it seems to be, as I said, there seems to be a growing consensus that war between the United States and China is coming. And most of our military advisors are predicting within the next 2 years. Okay, but what does war look like now? Right? Because we tend to think in terms of wars that we're familiar with, obviously. Like we may have a vague understanding of like World War II and World War I and what that looked like. We definitely, most of us alive today, definitely have an understanding of what happened in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. So do the Chinese. And so they have been seeking to redefine the nature of warfare. I'm going to get to that. But the primary catalyst for the growing danger that we see right now is the struggle between the US and China. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the US has been the world's sole superpower, right? So facing a world that adds China as a major power, along with a strengthening Russia, who, as we've talked about numerous times before, seems to be riding with the Chinese at the moment. This is something that very few people in Washington are willing to like just passively accept, right? At the end of World War II, China was kind of swept off the world stage. I mean, because of the severe damage that they suffered at the hands of the Japanese, obviously, and they had a really destructive civil war, like a 20-year civil war that they, I mean, obviously inflicted on themselves. The tyranny of Mao, China was it was a backwards, undeveloped country that was more concerned with trying to feed its own people, right? I mean, and like I said, Mao literally slaughtered millions of his own people. So they were more concerned with these things than playing any role on the international stage. But following Desert Storm, right, the first Persian Gulf War, thanks for the cookie, hubby. Um, Russia plays China often. I'm going to do a whole thing about that. I'm with you. But following Desert Storm, China made a really concerted effort to study the American way of war so that they could build a force that they knew would someday defeat the U.S. military. And over the past 20 years, China, I mean, they've been increasing their defense spending at about 10% a year, right? Which for them is a really substantial increase. Thank you, Fahim McRae, for the super chat. Much love to you. Um, according to the Department of Defense's most recent annual report on to Congress on Chinese military capabilities, China has militarily reached near parity with the United States in the region. right? And as the report shows, China is already ahead of the United States in certain areas. By 2049, the DoD is predicting, according to their report, that China will have this world-class military that they've been trying to build. Okay? And we've seen the reactions to this very recently. I mean, we've talked about AUKUS. I'm going to kind of touch on that in a little bit. Hey, Wonder Mod. Um, I mean, the Pentagon has added new military bases in the region. They've requested 27 billion from Congress to expand military capacity in what they're calling the Indo-Pacific region. Um, they warned that China is going to seize Taiwan at some time in the near future, and many of the leading figures in the US are openly advocating for giving Taiwan this direct security guarantee, right? Because we still are kind of just directly, indirectly like, yeah, we gotcha. It's going to be okay. Thanks for the cookie, EO2 Dave. Um, how about a war with the CCP looking like 15 kilotons, right? Uh, so I mean, a lot of people are now advocating like, hey, can we tell these people we got their back? But here's a question. I mean, coming from this administration, what does that even mean, right? Do our allies, I mean, do our own allies even trust what this administration is saying, right? So people are kind of trying to make these alternate alliances at the moment. I mean, Australian military leaders have said privately that they believe a war with China over Taiwan is a very high likelihood, right? We've got Japanese leaders openly saying that they would consider a Chinese invasion of Taiwan to be an existential threat, that they would definitely join any US war against China. I mean, I know I've said it a couple of times on Space Force News, but um I mean, China said that they would nuke Japan if they had anything to do with anything about Taiwan. And now Japan and China are fighting over the Senkaku Islands directly, right? China's been sending their ships up into Japan's space. Like it's getting kind of hairy, man. It's getting kind of hairy, right, Alara? Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. I did put a poll in the YouTube chat. If you guys see it, if you want to go vote on it, I'm kind of curious what you think. Um, so I mean, this is a problem. Now, China obviously regards the recent AUKUS coalition, uh, and I've talked about this, but I mean, this is the grouping of the United States, Australia, and the UK, and it's a military alliance. And at the moment, we've agreed to build nuclear submarines for Australia, and obviously China sees this as a direct military challenge. Now, granted, we're not talking about giving them nuclear weapons or, submarines with nuclear. These are just nuclear powered submarines, but it will vastly increase the efficiency of their fleet. Um, Belushi, thank you for the cookie. Belushi says also the claim over the South China Sea. Yes. Like I'm going to get to that, right? I mean, China just claims whatever they want, and what's crazy is they and I no, I'll go ahead. They craft a narrative around this, like with the South China Sea. They pretty much go down there. They start island jacking and setting up, a maritime militia. They've got hundreds of what they're claiming are fishing boats, right? That are brand new. Like we've got satellite shots of them. They're brand freaking new, strapped together, like for a minute, Duterte in the Philippines was having a fit. Like, what are you guys doing? Right? But China will craft this narrative like we have historically claimed the South China Sea. So, and after World War II, you came in and divvied this up. So really, we have we have the primary claim because our claim is historically supported. And then they just push that and push that and push that, right? Um, so, I mean, that's the argument they're giving over the South China Sea at the moment. Capable says, did I hear about the prison ship loaded up heading to Japan? No, I did not. If you have any sauce on that, please do send it. That sounds like an interesting development. Um, Khaleesi 2020, Fort Polk in Louisiana is infiltrated with China puppet commanders, harassing the soldiers and threatening them until they get the jab. I used to live in Fort Polk. My mother was stationed at Fort Polk. That's crazy, right? I've family in the area. Uh, wow, that's wild. Hey, Matt. 1776. Thanks for the can, and thanks for being loyal to the foil, fam. Um, yeah, so I mean, obviously, China regards the new AUKUS deal as like just a direct military threat. Like, hey, what are you guys doing, right? Um, and there's other things. We've seen the continued military enhancement of the Quad, right? Is focused on a potential military clash between the West and China. China's building the militarized islands in the South China Sea. They're cracking down on freedom in Taiwan. They've dramatically increased combat air sorties near Taiwan. I mean, directly in their airspace. Just the other day, they sent 24, right? 24 of their planes right into Taiwan's air defense zone. I mean, if that's not an like an FU come and get me from China, I don't know what is. I mean, it's crazy. Hey, Rapture Ready, thank you for the gold pills. Much love to you. Um, so each move by one party spawns an increase in rhetoric by the opposing side, right? So I mean, this moves and counter moves, right? But this overt military buildup and this aggressive rhetoric have us making the assumptions that the military, like that this is the actual nature of conflict. The thing is, China has long since adopted a totally different definition of warfare, one that involves every facet of our everyday lives. And I mean from our education system to Hollywood to scientific innovation. It's a literal culture war. It's not necessarily the large scale, like conventional war that we imagine in our heads. I mean, not yet anyway. But more of like a psychological and a subversive war that we have in fact been engaged in for quite some time. Norm, thank you for the cookie. Um, so I came across, and I've seen this mentioned numerous times recently, but I came across a book called Unrestricted Warfare, right? Now, this was written in 1999 as a direct response to, US and coalition actions in the Iraq war, right? Two Chinese colonels, which is what these guys were, they wrote this book called Unrestricted Warfare, and it was about warfare in the age of globalization. And their main argument is that warfare in the modern world is not any longer going to be primarily a struggle defined by military means. It might not even involve the military at all, right? The CIA's own translation of this book I identified the US as China's main enemy, right? This is what they view us as an enemy, which is funny because we see Chiden get up there and every time he starts talking about China, what is he saying? Oh, they're not our adversary, they're our competitor. Like, get your head out of your ass, dude, right? And this book details ways that weaker nations, and not just China, because mind you, I'm talking about China, but these tactics have been taken and studied in a variety of countries that have anti-American sentiment, and they're being applied all over the place. India is getting this. India is getting the same kind of response. Just they're being applied all over the place. But they give ideas on how a weak nation could destroy America using unorthodox attacks, kind of like 9/11. And China is preparing itself and really encouraging others to engage the US in this total war, right? I mean, the book has got a bunch of plans and strategies. I mean, from using like computers to smuggling illegal immigrants to manipulating the stock markets to influencing the US media to using weapons of mass destruction. Every which way possible to try and come at America, right? Um, yeah, well, it's getting foily up in here, right? So I see Cad's mentioning Yuri Bezmenov. Precisely. If you guys, I had done a video called Ideological Subversion, and I had pulled some of the footage of this guy, Yuri Bezmenov. He was a KGB defector. He came over here. Um, early 80s, he was giving a lot of like symposiums to Americans and explaining how the Russians were proceeding with defeating America from the inside, right? Defiling religion, pushing communist ideology, affecting, the educational system, and how they're influencing politics and how they're infiltrating the media. All of these tactics, right? And mind you, when Yuri was talking, I mean, this was before they had like home computers and stuff. Imagine what they could do today, right? And China has taken that kind of a notion and just amplified it by like a million. Um, Thanks for the phone, Matt. China has taken that shit and literally amplified those ideas, right? But so the first Iraq war really had an impact on the way the world saw us. And if you remember, we went in there and it was overwhelming force. I mean, we had achieved our objective in like whatever it was, 42, 45 days. Like we had gotten Saddam back into Iraq. Like they should have took him out then, right? They should have got him out of there then, but they didn't. But nevertheless, it was shock and awe. That's what they called it, shock and awe. Like, and we watched it live on TV, right? This really affected the way that the rest of the world saw us. And these guys wrote, um, and they wrote about it that this was a war which changed the world, ultimately changed war itself. It was truly fantastic, but it also caused people to ponder deeply. And they said they're not necessarily talking about changes in the instruments of war, the technology of war, the modes of war, the forms of war. What they're referring to was the function of warfare. And they go on to say, who could imagine that an insufferably arrogant actor whose appearance has changed the entire plot suddenly finds that he himself is actually the last person to play this unique role. Furthermore, without waiting for him to leave the stage, he's already been told that there's no great likelihood that he will again have this A role, right? At least not a central role in which he alone occupies center stage. And they ask, what kind of feeling would this be? Perhaps those who feel this most deeply are the Americans, who probably should be counted as among the few who want to play all the roles, including savior, fireman, world policeman, and emissary of peace. They continue, in the aftermath of Desert Storm, Uncle Sam has not been able to achieve again a commendable victory. We can't really argue with that. They say whether it was Somalia or Bosnia, Herzegovina, this has invariably been the case. In particular, the most recent action in which the United States and Britain teamed up to carry out air attacks on Iraq, it was the same stage, the same method, the same actors, but there was no way to successfully perform the magnificent drama that had made such a profound impression 8 years earlier. They're talking about the second Iraq war, obviously. I can only imagine what these guys had to say about the continued shit that we've been dealing with, that we were dealing with in Iraq, and I can imagine what they would have to say about our chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, right? I mean, since the first Persian Gulf War, we really haven't gone in and, you know, kicked anybody's ass and just took names and been done with it. Like, we've gotten bogged down and mired in what now we've termed the forever wars, right? So I mean, this is how they're looking at it. They go on to say, when people begin to lean towards and rejoice in the reduced use of military force to resolve conflicts, war is going to be reborn in another form, in another arena, right? And this is what we're seeing. They say that it'll be an instrument of enormous power in the hands of those who harbor intentions of controlling other countries or regions. And isn't it funny that they're the ones implementing this new form of war? And every time President Xi gets up on the world stage, right, be it at the UN or the little speech he gave at the World Economic Forum, he's constantly trying to tell people they have no imperialistic ambitions, right? Because how many times have we heard this? China has no imperialist ambitions while they're pushing the Belt and Road Initiative, while they're making inroads into how many countries across the world, while they're trapping these people, these entire countries in debt traps that they're never going to be able to extricate themselves from. But he will sit there straight-faced on TV and say, we're not imperialists. We're just against the American imperialists, right? Give everybody, and then he'll talk about equity. Give everybody an equal chance. We need more equity. We need more inclusion, right? As if they're living that at home, right? But in any case, um, they continue that, in this sense, and this is what they say. In this sense, there is reason for us to maintain that the financial attack by George Soros on East Asia, right? Because Laura and I had pulled that article on Space Force News, or that clip of the video where they called Soros the son of Satan the other day, right? China called Soros the son of Satan. The first time this was mentioned was in 1999, after the financial attack by Soros on East Asia. They say the terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy by Osama bin Laden, the gas attack on the Tokyo subway, the havoc wreaked by the likes of Morse Jr. on the internet, in which the degree of destruction is by no means second to that of a war, that these things represent a semi-warfare, a quasi-warfare, like a sub-warfare. They were arguing that this was the embryonic form of a whole new type of warfare. And they were right. They were right. Right? What? Sorry, I'm laughing at Matt and Laura in the chat. So, these guys were right. And what's crazy is when these guys wrote this book in 1999, I mean, think about it. Think about where things are today and where they were then. I mean, for God's sakes, like AOL was literally still sending out like CDs. With like 3/4 of American households didn't even have internet access at that point. Like, we were using dial-up, for God's sakes. But these guys saw that everything was about to change, and they saw that when they watched that war live on TV, right? They go on to promote, like I said, the development of tactics that weaker countries could use to counter the influence of the US. And we've seen this in places like Iran, right? We've seen it with the Taliban, both places which China has, significant influence at the moment, right? And I've gone on ad nauseum about that in other places, right? But this is an asymmetric warfare. It's gray zone warfare. It's non-conventional, right? They're trying to soften it up. They're softening up what they see as the battlefield without a shot being fired. And something else that they do in this book is that they advocate discarding international law completely as a moderating force in warfare, right? They say that war in the age of technological integration and globalization has eliminated the right of weapons to label a war. And with regard to a new starting point, they've really realigned the relationship of weapons to war, while the appearance of weapons of new concepts, and particularly new concepts of weapons, has gradually blurred the face of war. What they're saying, like, does a single hacker count as a hostile act or not? Can using financial instruments to destroy a country's economy be seen as a battle? Did CNN's broadcast at the time of an exposed corpse of a U.S. soldier in the streets of Mogadishu, did that shake the determination of Americans to act as the world's policemen? Did it alter the strategic situation? Think about Benghazi, right? Think about any of these numerous little things that have really shaped our opinion of what our function in the world should be. They say that obviously proceeding with the traditional definition of war in mind, there's really no way to answer those questions I just asked. But when we realize that all of these non-war actions are new warfare, we found this warfare that transcends boundaries and limits. In short, unrestricted warfare, which is where they get the name of the book. And we've got to remember, like, the traditional definition of warfare is a distinctly Western one, right? The way that we see it. What's happening now, all of that stuff we were talking about earlier, this is fundamentally different than what we've seen in the past. So instead of a war between nation states, we are seeing a literal clash of civilizations. Most of the wars in recent memory, we tend to view through like a Eurocentric worldview, right? And so the Chinese wanted to redefine the nature of war. I mean, we're no longer in a space where like tanks and soldiers and ships and shit have a monopoly on battlefield control. Like, that's just not the case. Like, we are seeing a mix of state and non-state actors. There's a lot of attention that is paid to these combinations of less traditional means of attack. I mean, think about the hacks on, solar winds, or when the hack on our oil supply line this summer, right? Things like that. Those were acts of war, right? This wasn't just, oh, well, they're not funded by, they're not directly tied. It's not like they have Chinese banners, like we work for the Chinese state. They're non-state actors, but they're sanctioned by the state. But the main argument is that in unrestricted warfare, there are no rules, right? I mean, these guys talk about everything: trade war, financial war, using what they call hyper strategic weapons, which could even replace nuclear devices. They talk about using terrorism, ecological warfare, psychological warfare, smuggling, media, drugs, tech, fabrication, just resource warfare, and definitely what they call international law warfare, lawfare, right? I mean, in this context, a hacker is a soldier, software engineers, like financiers, like anybody can be a soldier. Think about Charles Lieber, right? The guy that was he was where was he at Harvard? He was a professor. He was arrested from Harvard. And turns out the guy may or may not have had something to do with the current pandemic, right? But he was working under the Thousand Talents program. China is actively recruiting scientists and professors in American places and places all over the world, and they're paying them monthly to report back to them, right? Because these guys understood that the battlefield was omnidirectional, right? It exists everywhere. There is no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Everybody fights, and as a result, everybody's a target, right? So this is what they were saying in 1999. Now, the U.S. did try to respond to this, okay, and man, bruh, I don't know. So the U.S. tried to respond to this. I mean, this is something that this is not classified. It's out on the internet. I should put the links in the description. I'll try and do that so you guys can grab this stuff if you want it. But I mean, this is from the School of Advanced Warfighting, the Marine Corps School of Advanced Warfighting in Quantico, right? This was released in 2005 because it took them that long to get to it. But their summary of all of these ideas, this is what they said, right? That unrestricted warfare fails to recognize that future war will still have its limitations. In order to adhere to the concepts of the book, a nation would have to conduct warfare with all elements of national power, resembling something closer to the Clausewitzian model of total war. Thank you for the can, Maggie May. Good to see you. We go on to say, the U.S. goes on to say that there are major constraints to the implementation of this model. That they basically don't see how a legitimate government would wage these indiscriminate acts of warfare, right? And they say additionally, the book fails to mention how a nation organizes, trains, and equips all elements of national power to execute the different forms and methods of unrestricted warfare. They're wrong in this, right? The problem with the response that we gave, thanks Jay Brewskis for the cookie, is that at the time, first of all, they had no real idea of how, like, the Internet of Things and how cyberculture would affect things. Very few people saw the true level of interconnectedness that we were going to have. I mean, like, think about freaking social media companies hiring casino developers to literally get people addicted to their product, right? I mean, like, people didn't foresee that, okay? Also, they assume that, like, for a country like China to use all elements of national power would be difficult. That a legitimate government would be stuck within the realms of international law. And it's crazy because in chapter 5 of the Unrestricted Warfare book, the Chinese colonels, they give an example of what they call a cocktail style method of combining different forms of warfare. They give us the following scenario. What's going on with the moon strain? Where you going to the moon, Laura? Have fun over there. Let me know how that goes. They give an example of what they call the cocktail style method um, of warfare, and they say, okay, here's a scenario: an attacking nation secretly musters large amounts of capital without the enemy nation being aware. They launch a sneak attack against its financial markets. After causing a financial crisis, the nation buries a computer virus and a hacker detachment in the opponent's computer system at the same time, carrying out a network attack against the enemy so that the civilian electricity, traffic dispatching, financial transaction, telephone communications, and mass media networks are paralyzed. This action causes the enemy nation to fall into social panic. There are street riots and a political crisis. Finally, at the last step, military means are used in gradual stages until the enemy is forced to sign a dishonorable peace treaty. Is any of this sounding familiar? You know, our guys reply that in this example, right, that this could never happen. Thanks for the shade, CO2 Dave. The world has become a very evil place just in my lifetime. Fam, I know, but there are beautiful people here. There are beautiful people in the chat with you right now. There is hope, right? Don't let it discourage you. Like, I talk about this stuff or whatever, and I understand the ramifications of the shit that I'm talking. Okay? But this place, the world, there's so much beauty out there. There's still so much peace and love out there. Like, it is going to be okay. Right? It is going to be okay. I'm telling you. Like, it might get a little shaky for a minute, but humanity has this innate ability to grow and evolve, and this desire to want to find a better way. And I have hope in that. I have real hope in that. Right? We shall overcome, or whatever. Like, it's gonna be all right. I promise you. Um, but our guys, so to this example, right, this cocktail style attack, our guys say that as far as a large nation state, that China, they would be capable of doing some of that, right? But that new forms of terror attacks or smuggling or drug warfare would most likely not be conducted by China because they would adhere to rules of law, right? They've got memberships in, like, numerous international organizations, the United Nations, that they're bounded by rules of law, and that China would not, they would be too concerned with the unintended consequences that they would never do this. Okay, this baffles me. The fact that they think that China would be concerned about international law is, like, completely laughable to me, right? They mentioned that China wouldn't engage in drug trafficking or terrorism because they would adhere to this international law. China is literally supplying, right? They are literally responsible for shipping the majority of fentanyl into the US. They literally are supplying precursor chemicals for most of the synthetic drugs that the Mexican cartels bring across our border. They've been claiming entire swaths of sea and building islands in spite of international law, right? So again, I think that our guys were a little short-sighted on this analysis. I mean, I could say that hindsight is 2020, right? But to be honest, I see the same kind of things in the comments sometimes when I talk about China. Oh, they build shitty ships. They can't compete with us. Like, they literally stole their tech from us. So what do you mean? Like, the idea that, and then this idea that, like, small nation states and non-governmentals, they don't have the resources or the power to pull this kind of thing off, which is something else our guys say, is also ridiculous. They fail to see that these larger nation states, like China, is literally supporting smaller states like Iran, and then Iran is supporting terrorist organizations that they have out doing their bidding. This is happening right now, right? I mean, these people clearly don't give a fuck about the law, man. Iran has bought into the Belt and Road Initiative. They're supporting their own terrorist organizations. They're getting tech from China. They're using it on us or whatever. The Houthis, like whatever. Like this is a network. Man, people are choosing sides. And I don't think, international law, that's great in peacetime, but when we get down to the nitty-gritty, that stuff doesn't work. We have got to stop thinking that we like absolutely have this upper hand that, or my other favorite, that it couldn't happen here. You know, that can't happen here. Like, what are you talking about? General Milley, literally called China, trying to run interference on a sitting president. We've got Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, right? The guy that went viral for like spazzing out over our complete and total failure in Afghanistan. He is now sitting in the brig. While we're over here forcing our troops to attend like inclusion classes and pushing to generally feminize men in this country, China is waging war on what they call sissy men. Like I said, I did a video a while back on the subversion tactics being run. Please, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. But the process of subverting this, a culture is like a multi-generational attack on everything that we hold valuable: education, religion, entertainment, media, politics, our workforce, everything that we are seeing culminate right now. Our own elected officials are advocating actual communist ideologies that are in there, and it's backed by an authoritarian regime led by China. Like, it's crazy. And they've got a support of a large percentage of the citizenry. I mean, look at what happened to Australia over the past year. And don't get me wrong, like I said, our military kicks ass. Our soldiers, God love them, they're the best. It's our leadership that I worry about. Right? Trump had a way better handle on our international interests than Biden and his puppet masters could hope to, man. But our leaders have got to stop looking at conflict as being something that requires the actual military, okay? I've said this before. We tend to look at things like, well, if it doesn't work out, we can bomb the shit out of everything. I mean, when you're a surgeon, right? Every problem requires surgery. Right? That doesn't work when you're being undermined from within. I mean, for God's sake, Sun Tzu wrote that the highest military victory is won without ever firing a shot. And nations like China and Russia, they've been well ahead of us in this respect because, like our guys here said, they assume that large nation states are going to function within the realm of international law. I mean, for God's sakes, that's like expecting Democrats to hold a fair election at this point. It just doesn't work that way. As far as I'm concerned, the only law we need to be functioning within is the law of self-preservation, man. We need to preserve our way of life so that we can be the example for other places and other peoples and other countries. We can be the America that they carry American flags, at anti-censorship and pro-democracy protests across the world for. We need to be that country again. We need to be that light to the rest of the world again. Right? So, like I said, we need to function within the law of self-preservation, man, period. And that's where I'm at with it, right? Well, I mean, that's what I got for you guys today. I will be live again Friday at 8 with Tyler Koala for Conspiracy Theory Trivia. You know what it is. And then Sunday at 9 for Space Force News with my fave and your fave, Alara of Sirius. So definitely come check that out. Guys, I appreciate everybody that donated today. If you want to contribute directly, you can do so at loyal2thefoil.com, or my Cash App cash tag is in the links in the description below on the YouTube. Anything helps. It is much appreciated. Much love to you guys. Let me go over here and give you guys your scratching and your lemons. Yeah, and if you, now I can't remember who told me about the prison ship. If you can send that over to me, if you've got any information on that, definitely shoot it over to me now. You can always email if you have any information or stuff you want to talk about or questions or whatever, loyal2thefoil@protonmail.com. You guys are welcome to hit me up that way. The scratching has been released. Thank you for the cookie, love. Thanks, Belushi. Let me go over here and do these lemons for the DLive crew. I feel bad. I didn't even pull up the DLive today. Who is over here? What's up, Dubby Montana, Soul Rico? Thanks for the follow. Freedom's not free. Freedom is not free. That is right. We got to work for it, man. We gotta work for it. Good morning, Flower. Terry Lashley, thank you for the lemons, guys. Let me give you guys your chest. There you go. And yeah, so much love to you guys. And I will see you on Friday.